Hello everyone. In this video lecture, we are going to study the conduction system of heart. The human heart is myogenic. Human heart is myogenic. That means the heartbeat originates from the muscles. The other type of heart is neurogenic, that is found in arthropods, for example cockroach. But the human heart is myogenic. Myo word refers to the muscles. Now there are nodal tissues that help in the conduction of the heartbeat. So we are going to see the set of all the nodal tissues that are found in the heart. So what are the nodal tissues? The SA node. The second is AV node. The third is AV bundle, which is also known as bundle of His. His is the name of the scientist actually. Sometimes it is spelled as HIS and sometimes it is HISS. And the fourth one is Purkinje fibers. Purkinje again is the name of the scientist. So all these four help in the conduction of the impulse that travels and help in the passage of the stimulus. In this, we are just going to see the four chambers. We are not going to study any vessels or any other type of walls. We are just going to see the four chambers. We know that this chamber is the right auricle. This one is the left auricle. This is the right ventricle and this one is the left ventricle. Now, the four chambers are present and the conduction of the heartbeat starts from the right auricle. Now, this is the entry of the superior vena cava over here, and near this entry, just the opening of the superior vena cava, is the nodal tissue, which is the SA node present. Here is the SA node. It is not actually present inside the chamber. It is present on the right side of the right auricle. That means it is present in the wall. So the first one is the SA node. This particular node is called as the pacemaker, because it maintains the speed of the heartbeat, which is 0.8 seconds. So after every 0.8 seconds, the stimulus or the impulse is generated by the SA node. So the heartbeat is always 0.8 seconds and it is a rhythmic cycle. After every 0.8 second, the new heartbeat will be originated by the SA node. So it is known as the pacemaker. Let us see the characteristics of SA node. This is the first nodal tissue, and the most important thing is that it is the one which originates the heartbeat. The location, it is located in the right wall of the right auricle. So here it starts or generates the impulse. Now as soon as it generates the impulse, it spreads in the entire auricle. This spreads in the entire auricles. That means both the left auricle and the right auricle. This causes the atrial depolarization. What does the atrial depolarization mean? Atrial depolarization. The other term for atrial depolarization is actually the systole. That means the systole of the auricles. So here the auricles are contracted. That means as soon as the impulse is generated by the SA node, both the auricles will contract, and in response the blood will be just pushed into the ventricles. So it starts from here. Now we will come to the second node, which is the AV node. The AV node is located somewhere over here. This we can say as the junction of the interauricular septum and interventricular septum. So if this wall is the interauricular septum and this one is interventricular septum, the AV node is situated in the junction of the both over here, somewhere in the AV septum. The full form of AV node is auriculoventricular node, while the SA node, the full form is sinoatrial node. Sinoatrial node. Let us come to the second node now, the AV node. This is the second node and the full form is auriculoventricular node. It is also known as the pace setter. This has to be taken into account that SA node is known as the pacemaker and AV node is known as the pace setter. Now the impulse which is generated by the SA node is received by the AV node. Because there is a barrier between the auricles and the ventricles, so the SA node cannot pass on the impulse directly to the ventricles. We require an intermediate nodal tissue, which is the AV node, the auriculoventricular node. So it reaches from here to here within, the speed is 1 meter per second. The speed by which this impulse from the SA node reaches to the AV node is 1 meter per second. So this is the speed, while the time taken is almost 0.3 seconds. So the time taken is 0.3 seconds. Now the AV node gets activated. By receiving this impulse, this gets activated. So from here there is another tissue which is present and is known as the AV bundle. As I said, the third nodal tissue is the AV bundle, which is also known as the bundle of His. From here it bifurcates or branches into two parts, the right and the left, and then branches into different fibers. So this is known as the Purkinje fibers. This is Purkinje fibers. And these two branches, we start calling it as left branch of bundle of His. This side would be right branch of bundle of His. And this is the AV bundle. This is the AV node. And this is the SA node. So in this diagram you can see the SA node I'll mark as 1, the AV node as 2, the AV bundle as 3, and then the Purkinje fibers as the fourth part, which helps in the conduction of the heartbeat. It originates from here, then it reaches into the AV node, and from the AV node then it reaches into the AV bundle, which is present in the interventricular septum, which then divides into two branches, the right and the left bundle of his, and then which further branches into the walls of the ventricles known as Purkinje fibers. This tells that the conduction would spread in the ventricles this way. We studied till atrial depolarization, which I called as atrial systole. That means after the systole of the auricles, the systole of the ventricles will start. So what is the function of this AV node? It will help in ventricular depolarization. I'll write here ventricular depolarization. So we can call this as ventricular systole. Depolarization means systole. Earlier also in other chapters when I was teaching nervous system, I told what is depolarization. So to sum up, or to just to in short, if I say this is the normal resting membrane, usually the outside has positive charges and the inside has negative charges, but as soon as the stimulus is received, the charges get opposite. This is a condition which we say just polarization. This is a condition when we say that the membrane is polarized. But as soon as the stimulus is received, the charges become opposite. Inside becomes positive and outside becomes negative. Such a condition is depolarization. That is what is happening over here. That means whatever impulse we are talking about that is passing in the diagram is in the form of current or the movement of charges. So we are talking about atrial depolarization and then ventricular depolarization. And who is the conduction system? These nodal tissues. So finally from the AV node it comes into the AV bundle and then finally it reaches into the ventricles, causing the ventricular depolarization. In this way the auricles and the ventricles contract, and finally when they relax we call it as repolarization. That is the joint diastole. This is atrial systole, this is ventricular systole, and then comes the third phase in which all the four chambers relax. We call it as repolarization. So systole is depolarization and diastole is repolarization. If there is any irregularity in this, the condition is known as arrhythmia. All this process that is happening, that means atrial systole, ventricular systole, and everything can be recorded in the graphical form which we call as ECG or EKG. So let us see what is ECG or EKG. So the ECG or EKG stands for electrocardiogram. Now this is the graphical record or graphical representation of all the events during one heartbeat. So this is actually the pattern that is obtained in the graphical form, while the machine is known as the electrocardiograph, which is sometimes mistaken because we have this word as graph over here. So the machine is actually electrocardiograph, but the graphical representation that we obtain in the form of a paper is electrocardiogram. So electrocardiograph is the machine which was invented by Einthoven. So this machine, ECG machine, is actually invented by Einthoven, and it gives a graphical representation called as EKG or ECG, and if there is any irregularity it is recorded in this graphical form. So how is the ECG pattern actually? There is a small wave in this manner, we call it as the P wave, and then there is a depression and then it moves up. This is Q, this is R, and this is S. And then there is flat, and then again there is a T wave. Now this is between 0.8 seconds. So it tells about one heartbeat. The same is repeated every time. Now let us see what each wave tells. Here particularly there are three waves. The first wave is the P wave. The second wave is the QRS wave. So this one is the second wave, and the third one is the T wave. So all the three, the first, the second and the third wave, tell about the different events that take place inside the heart. So the P wave is actually the atrial systole. The P wave, it is the atrial systole. As soon as this conducts, actually the auricles start contracting. When this P wave starts, the auricles start contracting. It prolongs for this particular time that we have already talked about in the cardiac cycle, and after this there is a small segment over here, the P and the Q. That means the SA node has generated the impulse at this, that is the start of the 0.8 second. So from here the SA node has started generating the impulse, and it has caused the atrial depolarization, which we call as atrial systole, which is recorded in the form of P wave. And when there is a depression in this wave, this PQ, the P is still on. This PQ segment actually is the part from where the AV node or the AV bundle will come into action. So this is the part in which it is handing over the impulse to the next nodal tissue. The QRS is the shooted up wave, which tells about the ventricular systole. The ventricular systole. So this is bit long, and from here the AV bundle, the bundle of His, and then the Purkinje fibers. By the end of this S, that is the wave, the Purkinje fibers has taken action and the entire ventricles are now in the contracted stage. So we call the QRS as a complete one wave causing the ventricular systole. And finally, when the systole is over, it has a bit relaxation stage which the T represents, and this is the joint diastole. So each wave represents the different events that are taking place during the cardiac cycle, and during one cardiac cycle there is the systole and the diastole, which constitutes the heartbeat. So this is actually the representation of the electrocardiogram, that is the ECG. And if there is any alteration in this is the ECG of a normal person. But if we see of a diseased person, of a patient who is having some heart problem, these will have deflections, and the doctor will just read this ECG pattern to tell where the blockage or where the performance of the heart is not proper. If something has happened near the P wave, that means the auricles are not functioning well. If it is in QRS, the ventricles are not functioning well, and maybe the valve are not functioning well. So this is all represented by the ECG or the electrocardiogram. So this is what we study today in the conduction system of heart. If you have any doubt, you may ask me in the comment section, and you can also refer to the questions that are given in the description box. Thank you.